Welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be teaching you all about CSS margin properties. So open up your CodePen files. I've already created the basic structure in HTML with 2 paragraphs and a heading. And I have given 2 classes to the to the paragraphs so that we can identify them separately, as we've already learned in the CSS lesson earlier. So the first paragraph has a class of para1 and the second one has a class of para2. So go ahead and proceed to the CSS file. Okay, so let's say I want to make a margin for h1. So as you can see, when I declare a margin 70px, CSS moves down and there's a space on all the sides. So this is how it changes. When you remove, it goes back to previous without any space. So this space is the margin, is part of the margin that is declared. Now I can even give it a border with a border width of 1px, and let's call it like a color. Let's say solid blue, whatever, or blue violet, can be anything, right? Okay, now here in this case, let's go to the another structure, which is another element, which is a p element. So since we've given it a class, the first paragraph dot para1 for the first paragraph. Okay, now here we would like to see how we can individually name the paragraph, create the paragraph. For example, margin top, let's say 50px. So for this paragraph, this is the margin top. Okay, margin right, let's say 90px. This is the margin right. Margin bottom 75px. I mean, just for example only. So this is the margin bottom. Left, margin left, let's say 95px, just for example's sake. So this is how it works. Okay, now this is called creating the different margins with individual sides. So top, right, bottom, left. So all the individual sides, you name them separately and create. Okay, now you can even use shorthand, and rather than use all these values separately, terming them separately, you can do it in one go. Example, dot p1. You know why the dot is there? Because we gave it a class. We gave the p a class of para1. So whenever you give a class of para1, you need to write a dot before the class, which we've learned earlier. Okay, so you just write margin and then write in the clockwise direction, top, right, bottom, left. So 50px from here, top, right 90px, bottom 75, left 95. So this does the same job. We just remove the redundant because you're just doing it 2 times, no need. It has the same effect, as you can see. So this is called shorthand property, because you can just write this in one go, but you're supposed to remember this stands for top, right, bottom, left, in that order. which is a clockwise order. Okay. Now what if you want to write a shorthand with 3 values? Okay. So okay, now what I do is let's take the value of 2, class of 2. So we do this for the second paragraph. Okay, margin with 3 values. Okay. Okay, now what happens is when you're writing 3 values, so what does the shorthand stand for? ATPX. So that means the top margin is ATPX. Next is clockwise order right. So the right is 50px. So whenever in shorthand 3 values, so the right just doesn't stand for right. The right stands for the right and the left. So right and left are both 50px margins, and the bottom is 100px. So that's what it means. Next, what if there are 2 values? You want to write 2 values shorthand. So that means the 2 values will be repeating. Okay, here. Let's do for the first paragraph and then delete this. Okay, margin. Okay, let's say 90px, 150px. This is just for example. Okay, so this means, so 90px, top. Okay, so when it's top, it's when you talk of 2 values, so it stands for a pair. So top and bottom 90px, 150px. Right is 150. So right and left is 150px. That's how it is considered. So just remember those values. Once you start practicing, you'll remember it all the more. So this means top and bottom. This pairing is for top and bottom and right and left. Remember that. So easy to remember. First value is top, so pair it with the bottom. Second value is right, pair it with the left. That's how you can remember better. Okay, what if you have just one value? How do you do that? Let's do that for paragraph 2. Okay, let's say 75px. What does this mean? So this we are talking about paragraph 2. So what does this mean? This means top is 75, right is 75, bottom is 75px, and the left is 75px. So it's for all the sides it is 75. This is what it means. If you write one value, it means that. Okay, now what if you want to do? What if you want to center the paragraph? That one is called auto margin. Okay, so let's change the para 2 again. Okay, dot. Okay, what if I write auto? Give it a width. Okay, so as you can see, what happens automatically, it is centered. It is centered, right? And the margin is auto. So the space is equally distributed. That's when you want to center your contents. This is what you do. Give it a margin of auto and give it a width of whatever, 500, or maybe you can even give it 200. Whatever. You can give it like 900. I mean, depending on the space available, you can distribute it accordingly. 7. Depends on how you want to center it. So this is how it goes. Okay, then there's another property which is called the inherit value property. Okay, so as we have seen in the HTML, you've seen in the HTML that there's a div div here. So div, as you know, is a container. So in the div you have, right under the div you have a h1 and you have the piece also. So that means h1 can inherit the property from div because this is inside the container. So let's try out. Usually anything which is inside the parent, so this is treated as a parent and this is treated as a child, this is treated as a child, so it can inherit the property from the parent as in real life. Okay, let's try it out. Div, let's say the margin 140 px. Okay, now what happens is, let me first remove all the paras here, as we just want to try the h1. Okay, so the div is margin of 140. I want to do h1 margin automatically. When the moment I write inherit, so the h1 will inherit the property, margin property, the same value from div. This is what happens here. That's quite cool. Okay, you can even do that for margin left or margin right, for entire margin, whatever way. Okay, now just remove this. Remove everything. Okay, let's do this another property which is called the margin collapse property, and this only applies, remember, to the top and bottom margins. Let's try it out. h1 okay, let's say margin so what does this mean? Top, right, bottom, left. Keep that in mind. Okay, then let's try this first paragraph dot para. Okay, margin, let's say 20px 0. What does this mean? So the top margin is 20, this is 0 0 0. Okay, so this is the bottom of the h1 and this is the top of the paragraph 1. So this is where the collapse can happen. Now whenever there's a value like this, the highest value is in between. It's never 90 plus 20px. The distance here will be whichever is the higher of the bottom and the top. So in this case, the bottom is 90 of the previous one, the heading, and the paragraph first is 20. So what will be the distance between the two? Here it will be the greatest value. This is how it's calculated, 90, when it comes to margin. Okay, so let's say we make this 90 and we make this 70. So in this scenario, what happens is, did I remove the previous h1s? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to remove this, otherwise this will interfere. Okay, so here the highest value is again 90. Okay, let's change this. So here the highest value is 70, so you can see the distance decreasing, moving up. Let's say the higher value becomes 40. So now the largest value between 40 and 50 is 50, so this becomes 50 instead of the previous 90. Again, if you change the higher value to 20, then this is 40, and then change this also to 10. So you can see the gap closing because this again moves up. Why? Because the largest distance value between the two is 20. So now the distance is 20. So you can even decrease it further, and if you make this 5px, what happens is between these two 10. So now the distance is 10px, the largest takes over. Now this is 5. You can even decrease it further. So then it's again further moving up. So now the largest of the two is 4px. Goes further up. Goes further up to 1. Now let's say you change this to 0. So as you can see, it's just the 1px. So this is how the margin collapses. This is how the calculation takes over. Now let's say there's a property called negative margin. So if you take a negative margin, you see what happens for this minus. So it's moving up further. Let's say completely move over, and it's kind of going over this. So overlap is happening. So this is what happens. So in other words, usually negative margins are avoided, considered like a taboo among some programmers, but it's not like that. Sometimes when you're doing web design, you can use the negative values when you want to move up and down the space up and down. But normally it is done in a minimalistic fashion. Okay. Next you have the percentage property. Okay, so let's delete these two. Let's take H1 again. Okay, let's say margin 20%. So this means this whole space, the margin space taken up is 20% of the whole container. So that's how it's calculated. Completely, it's too much. So you understand, it keeps on increasing. So this is how the percentage wise is calculated. Usually we don't do it that way, but just to show you what it means. Okay, so basically, as you have seen, whenever you do the minus margins, how it overlaps. Let's say you do the margin, the minus, the negative margins for the left and right. It's the same effect, -1. See how the movement happens. If you do left, it's moving left. If you do right, it's moving towards the right. So I hope you understood. So you can experiment with different values like this and kind of figure out how it is done. I've given you the basic idea already, the detail idea in other words, but you can even figure it out with different values and with different elements. And if you have any further doubts, you can put your questions below in the comment section. I'll be also including the link to my code, the CodePen file, so that you can access the code there and experiment further on that. If still any doubts, you can email me or you can comment out there. And also please stay subscribed. To those who are already subscribed, thank you to them. And also to those who are not subscribed, I would request you to subscribe for further such lessons, and I'll be introducing a lot more lessons on CSS as well as HTML and JavaScript. So many free lessons more to come in the future weeks. So stay subscribed, and be happy. Any doubts or any suggestions, please don't forget to comment out. Thank you and see you in the next session. Until then, a happy week. Thank you.